In a defining moment for her Chancellorship, Rachel Reeves today set out how public cash will be divided up between UK departments over the next few years. The biggest winners are health and defence. And we're told the devolved Scottish Government's budget will reach a record £52 billion per year by 2029. Departmental losers in day-to-day funding include the Home Office and the Foreign Office. Throughout her statement, the Chancellor struck an upbeat note about her stewardship of the economy, a perspective which, as we would expect, wasn't shared by her opponents.
I have made my choices. In place of chaos, I choose stability. In place of decline, I choose investments. In place of pessimism, division and defeatism, I choose national renewal. These are my choices, Mr. Speaker. These are Labour choices. These are the choices of the British people, and I commend this statement to the House.
Here we have the Chancellor, who refuses to listen. Not only tin-foil, but tin-eared too. And let me be clear, Mr. Speaker. It is working people and businesses who will pay the price come the autumn, with yet more taxes to pay for her weakness and her failures. Mr. Speaker, we cannot afford this spending review. And for many, the growing conclusion is that we cannot afford this Chancellor.
It's been almost a year since Labour swept to power with the promise of change. But we are still not seeing the scale of ambition needed to turn the country around. Will she strike a properly ambitious trade deal with Europe that will turbocharge our economy and bring in the billions to rebuild our public services? The government says its #1 mission is growth. This would be the way to deliver it.
And despite all the noise we hear from the benches opposite, the reality is that government spending is completely out of control. Inflation is up, unemployment is up, government borrowing is up, and the cost of government borrowing is up. And the only thing that's going down are jobs and GDP.
As we've mentioned, the spending review delivered additional funding for the Scottish Government. But Holyrood's Finance Secretary told us that didn't go far enough.
Scotland is being shortchanged, and that's in the Treasury's own figures, £1.1 billion that we could have had Scottish spending matched average UK departmental spending, and that's disappointing. Clearly we're pleased that Acorn has now been committed to, but what is being committed is not clear. We need to understand how much and in what form and when, and there is no information on that whatsoever.
And the Acorn being referred to there is the Acorn Carbon Capture Project in Aberdeenshire, which is being backed by the UK Government. Well, among those who watched the Chancellor's statement was STV's Westminster correspondent, Gourtsoyannis. So what stood out for you in the spending review?
Well, Rona, for me, the most striking thing was the dramatic change in tone from the Chancellor on the economy. Gone was all the gloominess about Labour's economic inheritance and the tough talk about spending discipline and tough choices. Instead, the message was one of national renewal and public investment, and some of that hope that critics say has been missing from Labour's offer so far, including some Labour MPs who blame the Treasury for what they say are unforced errors that have led to the government's unpopularity. The other striking thing was the way that Rachel Reeves focused her political attacks on the SNP, yes, but particularly on Nigel Farage's Reform Party. That tells you a lot about the changed political landscape over the past year and the political pressure that has forced the Chancellor into this change of approach.
Do you think she has done enough to convince people that the renewal of Britain is on the cards?
Well, that's the crucial question. I think what we can say is that Rachel Reeves has gone all in on this strategy. The government has focused spending in England and Wales on the NHS and housing, two areas where they think that extra cash can make a meaningful difference to public services and to people's lives. And they front-loaded that spending to the start of this Westminster Parliament. Spending is going to grow much more slowly in the final years of the Parliament. So there isn't really anywhere else for the Chancellor to go if this plan doesn't work. And by the way, the fact that spending is going to grow more slowly is going to mean tough choices for whoever forms the next Scottish government. You heard Shona Robeson there complaining that the growth in the Scottish Government's block grant is probably going to be eaten up by growth in demand for public services. So those tough choices are likely to be a feature of next year's Holyrood election campaign.
the spending review has just given the Scottish Government £9.1 billion extra from next year. That's the largest settlement in the history of devolution, and Scottish voters will be looking at that and saying we want it spent well on our priorities. And if you see the UK Government's priorities, we're investing it in health, we're investing it in defence, and we're investing it in growth in the economy, which is about skills and jobs. The Scottish Government, I think, and arguably have wasted the £4.9 billion extra they got this year. So the voters will be asking themselves the question come May next year, who do they trust to spend that extra money?
This announcement was all about spending. We've got a budget in the autumn. Do you think we might expect tax rises then?
Well, the Chancellor insists she's going to stick to her tough fiscal rules and that she won't come back for more tax revenue, certainly not income tax, corporation tax or employees' national insurance. She says this is going to be paid for thanks to an improving economy, but I think there's big questions about that. The fact that growth has been hit by these trade wars that have broken out, unemployment is up, the cost of borrowing is up. So once again, I think there isn't anywhere for Rachel Reeves to go if this plan doesn't work other than more cuts or those tax rises.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us this evening. Well, to delve deeper into the spending review, we brought together three guests: the businesswoman and investor Marie Macklin, the economist Joao Sousa, who's Deputy Director of the Fraser of Allender Institute, and Gina Davidson, the Scotland political editor with LBC. Marie, so the spending review is dividing opinion down at Westminster. What's your general take? Is it what Scotland and the UK needs at the moment?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the £52 billion for Scotland is most welcome. But let's start drilling this down. We're sitting here talking tonight about this project, Acorn again, Rona. And what's really changed in that project, apart from some lip service today saying within this Parliament we hope to return it if it's coming in budget and it's shovel ready. This is yet another just transition project that's actually no delivering, and it should be delivering economic value. And if you look at just transition for a moment, today I've spent time down at Peel Ports in North Ayrshire, Hunterston. A £3.5 billion project at Hunterston Park, over 5,000 jobs that will return skills and education, with supply chains coming in. From these projects, you have various companies that want to invest in Scotland just now, but there's a grey area because they can't invest, because they can't actually get the orders, Rona, to actually start delivering the sales value. And this is because the energy companies are behind on planning from the government, and they're also behind with the receipts that they need.
But do you welcome the spending statement as a whole? There was a lot of focus on Scotland.
Absolutely, there's a lot of focus. There's £52 billion there to spend, and we can come on to that later. But for me, there is too much lip service being paid to especially green transmission, and the projects are not creating economic value they should just now.
Gina, the Scottish Government welcomed some of the package, but they weren't totally happy about the funding, were they?
No, they have said that they were shortchanged. They were looking at the growth of their budget over the next 3 years compared to the growth of other UK department budgets, saying that it's just 0.8% compared to 1.3%. So they feel that they're losing out, and there's somewhere in the region of 1.1 billion that they believe they should have got if they were at that average as other UK departments. But as Marie was saying, I mean, they are getting the biggest settlement since devolution began. It's a massive amount of money, and of course it's now up to them to decide how they're going to spend it. Yeah, and we'll come back to that in a second, but what did you make of the funding package for Scotland?
So much of it was mechanical, right? It comes through the Barnett formula. The fact that, as Gina was saying, it's not the same as the average growth rate for UK government departments, that's true, but that's because some of the increases in spending were on reserved things like defence, for example, which doesn't attract consequentials. So, I mean, it's quite hard to say that Scotland really has been shortchanged when it's a perfectly normal operation of a mechanical formula.
And just to come back to what you were saying, so they've got this increased block grant. Could this be seen as a war chest for the Scottish Government, very handily in the run-up to the Scottish election, which is this next year, of course? Yeah, I think privately that's what people in the Scottish Government are thinking, because they will have more money to spend on the NHS, they will have more money to spend on housing, and indeed we saw a new Cabinet Secretary for Housing appointed today in a kind of mini reshuffle, putting a real emphasis on trying to solve that housing emergency, and there will be more money to do that. So yes, politically it's actually going to be pretty good, I would think, for the SNP in the run-up to next year's elections to be able to say
NHS waiting lists are coming down because they should, with the amount of money that they're able to spend, that we're building more houses and we're tackling the cost of living crisis. All these things that people say are at the forefront of their own agendas. For Labour, it's tricky because obviously they're saying, here you are, here's money, spend it as you see fit, but they'll want to pick holes in how the Scottish Government are spending it, and that's what the fight will be around come those Holyrood elections next year.
So their decisions to make. Rachel Reeves was very upbeat today. Do you think people will feel better off as a result of this spending spree she's been on today, Joao?
I think it will take a bit of time. So the capital investment, it will hopefully bear fruit, but it takes a long time for capital investment to transform into public services being delivered. Even on day-to-day spending, there's a lot of spending in the short run, but there's a lot less in the years ahead. So 27, 28, 29, it's actually growing very slowly for Scotland and falling in real terms for most departments. So that's not a particularly great set of circumstances to be looking at 3 years down the line.
Do you think people will feel better off?
I don't think people will feel better off, Ronan. I'm not being negative about it. It's about what actually we see out there just now. I mentioned earlier there's various projects there that are shovel ready to actually be delivered, but because there's no any government-backed guarantees coming in for certain projects, they actually can't get delivered and create economic value. And I welcome the fact that the government have announced £750 million for the supercomputer at Edinburgh University, but I was on this programme last year when that was withdrawn. So that's coming up in another year of economic value that should have been returned and in the system, and I'm quite sure the cost of that computer will have increased in value. So where does that end in that budget allocation? So obviously we're sitting here as well, the communities are looking justice for the injustice of some of the things that are happening just now. You've got legal aid sitting out there crying out for money, you've got the house builders for social housing, housing associations looking for money. So it'll be interesting to see where the Scottish Government actually start allocating these funds. And
what do you think the Scottish Government could do with this extra money to boost the economy within Scotland then?
Absolutely. The famous phrase, build, build, build. You need to start with infrastructure, start building it from bottom-up growth in the heartland of our communities who are crying out for assistance and help. That will get the construction industry moved. There's less people going into construction now than there was in 2019. That's not acceptable. We need to get our young people back into skills and start delivering these houses.
Is that the way forward, Joao, to boost the Scottish economy?
Certainly. Capital investment is really important. And actually, when you look at the allocations for the Scottish Government, they're actually falling in real terms towards the end of the period. So that's quite concerning once you exclude some of the financial transactions for the very important affordable housing programme, but that's only part of capital spending. So it's quite concerning the futures down the line.
Yes, if I can come in there, you're sitting just now with councils allocating 25% in the planning applications for housing for social housing. If you speak to housing associations and council, they don't have the money to deliver that. So it remains stagnant. So what I'm hoping is, with this money coming in, that some of that money will be allocated. It's great that we've now got a new Cabinet Secretary in housing and start getting people into homes again.
Sorry, on you go.
I was going to say, the other thing to look at, I think, in the spending review is the money that's being spent in defence, a reserved issue, but one which the UK government is certainly convinced Scotland and the Scottish economy could benefit from through investment in the defence industries here, creating jobs and so on and so forth. So again, something that we'll have to wait and see if that actually evolves and delivers over the 3-year period.
The Tories said today that because of all the spending, there's inevitably going to be tax rises in the autumn budget. What's your take on that, Joao? Because the Labour Party have been very clear that they don't want to raise taxes.
So they've kind of stuck to the totals that they did say they were going to stick to in March. So you could say there's no need for tax rises if you're going to meet the fiscal rules. On the other hand, they have committed to some additional spending, like, for example, the winter fuel payment, which is over £1 billion. That's got to come from somewhere if you're going to maintain the headroom and the fiscal rules. So I think there's mixed signals there, but it's not impossible. Indeed, it's probably quite likely that there will be some tax rises coming.
Quite likely. I mean, politically, that would be very difficult for Rachel Reeves and the Labour Party, wouldn't it?
Yes, it depends where the taxes come, of course. I mean, they've been very strict about not putting income tax up, not, individual personal taxes being raised. So if there's any headroom in any other area, I think that's probably what they'll look at first. But interestingly, the Scottish Government saying that, they've been shortchanged and that they think there will be a shortfall over the 3 years. I did ask Shona Robison about that today, the Finance Secretary, about whether or not we'll see more tax rises here in Scotland, and she was very clear that she didn't think that the Scottish Government had any headroom to do that. She felt that those with the broadest shoulders were already being taxed more than elsewhere, and they couldn't be asked to do any more. So again, an interesting conundrum for the Scottish Government.
Yeah, okay, and we'll find out when the autumn budget comes what is going to happen. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you all very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.